Good evening, everyone. My name is Fatima Haidar, and I am your MC for our webinar this evening. I'm also a media analyst with CJPME. So not everybody has experience writing to the media, and even fewer people have experience with their member of parliament. But with the situation in Gaza getting worse, it's time for all of us to get out of our comfort zone. That's why we scheduled today's practical webinar, Gaza Action Webinar, writing to the media, calling your MP, and meeting your MP, to help people get more used to doing these types of things. Joining me are panelists Jason Toney, Director of Media Advocacy here at CJPME, Alex Patterson, Senior Director of Parliamentary Affairs, Thomas Woodley, President at CJPME, and myself. There's also Michael, but you won't really see him. He's our VP, and he will be behind the scenes managing any technical difficulties. As we begin, I would like to recognize that we have people joining us from across Canada and panelists in both the Montreal and Ottawa regions. As such, this event is taking place on Indigenous land across Turtle Island. As someone in Montreal, I live on the unceded territory of the Mohawk Nation, Ganyagehaga Nation, which has historically been known as a gathering place for many First Nations. For our panelists from the Ottawa region, who lives on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg, I also recognize the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the Ottawa River watershed. This webinar will be broken into 3 parts, each with tips, tricks, and useful tools. So the first part will be how to write to the media and get them to improve their coverage, with panelists Jason Toney, Director of Media Advocacy, and myself, for more or less 30 minutes. Then the second part is how to make a call to your MP and have the right message. And along with the third part, so how to meet with your MP and make sure it goes well. So the panelists for the second part will be Thomas Woodley, the president of CJPME, and the panelist for the third part will be Alex Patterson, the director of policy advocacy. So it's going to be more or less 20 minutes for both parts. There will be a brief Q&A period after the second part of our webinar. After the first part of our webinar, so the how to write to the media, and a Q&A period at the end of the webinar. So at any time during the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to submit your questions to today's speakers. To do so, you just click the Q&A. So it's just beside the chat at the bottom of the control panel, and enter your question. So the panelists will address as many questions as they can during the Q&A session. And also feel free to ask questions in French. We have a bilingual team, so really feel free to ask your questions in French also. We'll wrap up our event together after about an hour or so. So if you have to leave before the end of the webinar, please just feel free to sign off. We won't hold it against you. So Jason, I'll give the floor to you to introduce our first panel, which is how to write to the media.
Yeah, thanks, Fatima, and welcome everyone. We're really excited to have this webinar with all of you. So I'm going to get straight into it. We want to make this as productive and useful as possible. So earlier this year, CJPME launched the Media Accountability Project. It's been a really intense period, obviously, for the project, but we've had many months to sort of ramp up and get ready for this moment. So the purpose of the Media Accountability Project, for anybody that this is new for, is fundamentally to encourage Canadian media to provide full, fair, and balanced coverage on Palestine, something we just haven't seen historically in Canada. And we base our work on professionally recognized journalistic ethics. These are ethics promoted by groups like the Canadian Association of Journalists. So these are widely recognized standards that we're basing our work on, that are written by the journalists and editors that we're writing to. The MAP, as we call it, has two primary thrusts. One is driven by our staff at CJPME, and the other one is driven by volunteers, people like you, our MAP responders. So our staff, we use some advanced tools to monitor the media. We monitor all media in Canada, print, online, broadcast, etc. We critique different journalistic practices through formal letters that we submit to journalists and editors around the country. We build relationships with those journalists and editors. We have meetings where we have discussions about the trends that we're seeing. And we also launch media alerts. Now, media alerts is something we're going to talk quite a bit about. Fatima will go through in some detail what those are and what they look like. That's really going to be the best way as a volunteer who's interested in getting involved in the media side of these issues. It's a really good way to get involved on these things. So we try to make that as easy as we can for you. And we'll go through in some detail what that looks like. So our volunteers, one thing that you can do to help us out, I'm always happy to get emails, people tipping us off to bad coverage. I've gotten a lot of great emails in the past weeks of people giving us some tips about things they've seen in Canada specifically. But the other thing that volunteers can do is participate in these media alerts. So the alerts are a grassroots response to media coverage that we're seeing. They can be critical or supportive of the articles or segments that we're sending you. So what is an alert? Again, Fatima will go through in more depth, but in general, it's an email from CJPME with some information about an article that's worth responding to. So why do we do alerts? We try to alert the media to problems that we're seeing in the coverage and to demonstrate that there are many people who share our concerns about their coverage or who are appreciative of good coverage when we see it. We try to do both. We try to critique and also be appreciative to try to encourage better coverage. So how do we choose an article or a segment for an alert? What goes into that? You might wonder if you're already a MAP responder. Well, one of the first things that we look at is the outlet. We also consider the article that we're responding to, and we give a strategic evaluation. So when it comes to the media outlet, we ask ourselves a primary question: will that outlet be responsive? Will they get back to us? Do we think there could be some sort of result? We're able to make that assessment based on our experience in the writing campaign we've done through our staff and in past alerts. So we always consider that. We also consider if the outlet is a member of the National News Media Council, if they're print or online journalism, or if they're a member of the Canadian Broadcasting Standards Council, that's for broadcast media. If they're a member of one of these organizations, that means that these organizations are in charge of adjudicating for resolution if they have been confirmed to have violated a journalistic standard. So I invite you to look a bit more into that on your own if you're interested. So it's the National News Media Council or the Canadian Broadcasting Standards Council. So sometimes we bring issues to them, and then as a result, something will get corrected. So that's one consideration. When it comes to the article or the segment itself, we always ask ourselves if it's representative of broader issues that we're seeing in the media. We try to take on articles that are sort of straightforward issues, things like omissions in the coverage, a lack of balance. There's anti-Palestinian racism, which unfortunately we see a lot today, or if there's just missing context, like not mentioning that there's occupation in Palestine. And we also make a strategic evaluation. Does the journalist who we're supporting potentially need our support? Will that be useful in some way? Are there attacks against them that our encouragement might be useful? Or if we're making a criticism, will they listen or care at all? So we consider those things when we conceive of our alerts. So these are all things going on in the background when we're presenting alerts to our responders. So most of the time, we're asking our media responders through these alerts to write a letter of critique, but from time to time, we'll have people thank the outlet, and that's always made clear in every single alert. So that'll be very clear to you what we think should be done, and we'll give you all of the information, the contacts, etc., for how to do that. So again, Fatima will go into more detail, but we've seen some amazing impacts from some of our efforts already. Very recently, we launched an alert to the Toronto Star. They corrected an article in many ways. About a week ago, they had put refugee for Palestinian refugees in quotation marks, and they took it out. They had in the article Israeli casualty counts, but excluded or omitted the Palestinian ones. They fixed that. And we've also just seen at the Toronto Star in particular, as a result of our efforts, certain improvements. Now, it's imperfect, but we've noticed and we have some evidence that through these alerts and through people writing to them, they've taken steps to improve certain aspects of their coverage. Another impact that we've had through these alerts recently was we did an alert about a CBC article, and some of our responders mentioned that they had a map which showed Jerusalem as entirely outside of the West Bank and the Golan Heights as entirely within Israel. In response, the CBC fixed that map, which is a really important part of this media coverage, making sure it's clear how these maps are supposed to look. We've had student journalists, when we've reached out to student papers, give us a huge amount of appreciation for the alerts we've done when it comes to the student papers, because they come under attack not only from outside lobby groups and watchdogs, but also from their own administrations, and our efforts are really important in that sense. And we've even had a lot of our responders get letters to the editor published in newspapers, which is really important for bringing more voices into the mix and making sure our media has a real diversity of opinion that it's tended to lack. So on my end, that's all I have to say, but I'll be happy to answer questions at a different point in time. So I'm going to hand it back to Fatima. Thank you, Fatima, so much for your great introduction.
Thank you, Jason. So my role in our webinar, apart from being MC, is to walk you through the steps and strategy required to submit a letter to the media after receiving a media alert from someone like Jason, who explained it pretty well. So I guess the first thing that I'm actually going to show you is how to sign up to be a CJPME map responder. So I'm going to actually share my screen and show you how you can sign up. Okay, I think everyone can see my screen. I just need one yes from my team, maybe.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. So this is the media accountability tab where you can actually sign up to be a media responder. So if you want to find it, this is the homepage of the Media Accountability Project. So you just go to more, help out, and you get the form to be a media responder. I'll actually also add the link into the chat. So it's pretty straightforward: first name, last name, email, mobile phone, phone address. Now I'm already a media responder, so I cannot fill in my personal information, but for people who worry like me, I just want to clarify that you will receive a confirmation email if you have filled the form correctly. So there's no need to worry about this. So this is the form to sign up to be a media responder. We're going to be launching an alert maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes after the webinar. So make sure you sign up as a media responder after if you want to give it a try and maybe try to write a letter to the alert that we're going to send after the webinar. So now I just showed you how to sign up to be a map responder, but what is actually a media responder here at CJPME? So there's two ways really a media responder at CJPME can help. So first is to respond to media alerts. So the alerts are typically, they fall into three main categories. So the first category is to criticize. Criticizing can help make changes to the media coverage in future reporting, which is really important. The second one is to thank. So thanking journalists can give them the support to keep covering events in an accurate and balanced way, which is the main goal. So I want to say that thanking is as important as criticizing, because you really want journalists to keep on covering events in an accurate and balanced way. And when you criticize, you actually want them to improve their coverage and make changes. And the last one, which is less common, is to write a letter for the outlet's letters page. So it's usually letters to the editor, op-eds. And the second, I want to say, way that you can help out as a media responder is just to inform the MAP team of any interesting developments in your media advocacy work. So have you seen any articles, broadcasts that deserve a response? Because we go through them and we actually launch sometimes alerts about articles or broadcasts that our media responders send us. And did you get published? Because we really want to do a follow-up on if any media responder got published in the media. So now I'm going to actually show you what is an alert. I'm going to share my screen. So can everyone see?
All good.
Thank you. So this is how an alert looks like. So you see here the headline. So in this alert actually is a good coverage. So it's media outlet to be thanked. It can't be green. So when it's media outlet to be thanked, when it's good coverage, or it can be red when it's poor coverage, media outlet to be critiqued. Then there's just like basic information, the title of the piece. You get to media outlet. Now, in this case, it's a Toronto Star piece. You can click and you can actually access, read the article. Oopsie. Then, if somehow you have a paywall, we actually also link a PDF. So it's also good. Like I said, if you have any paywall, any problem accessing the piece.
Hey, Fatima, maybe
Yeah.
expand your screen just a little bit. Make it a
Oh,
little
sorry.
easier for you. No
Right.
problem.
Is it better?
Yep, perfect.
Thank you. So now we get to the comments of the CJPME media researcher. So we usually just write angles that you might want to include in your letter that you're going to send to the media outlet. Now, two important things to really remember is to not copy paste the points that are written. It's really important to kind of make it your own, personalize your letter, and also you don't have to put all the points in your letter. You can only just stick to maybe one or two main points. So I can maybe go through a bit fast on the comments, just because I'm going to show you actually how we write a letter. So this one was actually just thanking the Toronto Star. They're citing the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. They're making a clear distinction between humanitarian pauses, ceasefire. They're pointing out Canadian cabinet ministers and Trudeau and how they kind of been evasive on the question. on the UN Secretary General comment, then how the article laid down the Geneva Convention, a lot of points actually, and then just citing a lot of experts on international law. Then what is actually really cool about it is that you don't even have to do anything. You just need to click this link to launch an email. So you see, you have all the emails. So the journalist, this is the editor, this is I think these are editors, these two. And we also added the email to the letter to the editor so that your letter will automatically be sent there. And then the headline is already made. So you just, anything that you need to do is just to draft your letter and send it. If you have any problems and it's not launching, we also added the email links here. So you can like copy paste them in a new email. So I'm gonna actually show you the letter that I sent for this alert. So you see, it's not like a huge letter. Like I said, you can stick to 1 to 2 points. Now you can also be more lengthy if you want. It's as you wish. Really, what's important is really to personalize it. So how you can personalize it is maybe adding a fact. So you might not be aware, but UN expert recently announced. You may not be aware, but Canada, ... You can bring in your own personal experiences or perspectives that you may be aware of. So maybe you went to Palestine, where maybe you have worked with indigenous people or Palestinians. Then you can bring in something specific to your locale. So in Montreal, we often observe ... Then you can also bring in your own emotions. So you are disappointed, you're surprised, you're happy to see, you applaud, etc. So I'm going to show you actually how I actually put in these points into my letter. So here I found that there are many different opinions about who's right, who's wrong. So this is just a personal opinion on how people debate the issue. Then here I stated that I studied international law at university. So this is my personal background. And it's also a point that I brought into the letter about all the basics of international law, the Geneva Convention, citing Canadian experts. Then here I wrote, I am personally very bothered by Israel's collective punishment. So this is how I'm feeling. And then here, the last sentence, I was also appreciative that you cited Michael Link, the former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian territories. So this is also my personal appreciation. Now, another point that I might want to add is that it's really important to make a difference between the news that you're reading and how the journalists actually covered the news. Now, we just want to focus on how the journalists actually covered the news and not the news itself, not the topic or the story itself. So you can't really be upset or happy about the news, but you can be upset and happy about the journalism or how the journalists actually covered this issue, these news, or this topic. So as you can see, it's not a long letter. It was just built on 2 main points, which are like international law, the Geneva Conventions, citing Canadian experts. So that's how drafting a letter as a media responder looks like. And I guess that will brings us to the end of the first part. I don't know if people have any questions. regarding the first part.
Yeah, thanks so much, Fatima. I can jump in here because I've been watching some of the questions come in, and I've picked out a couple that I thought there are a lot of great questions. I think some of us were trying to reply, some of our staff were trying to reply directly to people. So hopefully we got to you if you asked something. But I picked out a couple questions that I thought would be interesting for everyone to hear. So the first one comes from Faisal Ibrahim. Faisal asks, would you suggest making requests of media organizations to cover certain stories that you think should be covered but haven't been? If so, how would you suggest we do this? For example, they go into an example. I think I have some examples that I'll share with you that will make some sense. The answer is yes, this is a great idea, and CJPME has done this before. So if there was a demonstration in your town or city that didn't get coverage, or you know one is coming, we invite you independently to look up the editor of your paper and write to them and say, this event is coming up. We'd like to have a journalist present to give some coverage to this. And we've seen success with that. So that's certainly something that CJPME tries to do. And we definitely invite you to do that independently. Most papers have a contact us page where they'll have a newsroom, an email for an editor, some kind of form you can fill out, and they read them. So it's a really worthwhile effort. So I don't think that all of your efforts have to come through the CJPME map alerts. I think it's a great option for a lot of people. It makes it easy, it makes it accessible, and it has a high impact, but certainly I would suggest that you go ahead and reach out to your local newspaper or broadcaster and invite them to cover an issue that's going on. I hope that answers your question. Another question that I can jump to, somebody asked about opinion articles. Do we try to take them down? They mentioned one article that had a demonstrable lie in it. How do we deal with these? So the MAP project does deal with opinion, and occasionally you'll see an alert for an opinion article, but it's worth letting people know that opinion articles follow a sort of different set of journalistic principles. There are some principles that apply. If it crosses the line or promotes violence or is explicit hate speech, then that crosses the line. An opinion article has to be based in fact. But the idea of getting anything unpublished is basically unheard of in Canadian media. If you've been a MAP responder for a while, you might remember a case where we actually fought against the CBC who unpublished something. It's very important, according to Canadian journalistic standards, that there is a record of things, that they are not removed from the public record. So we do deal with opinion, and we do, but we have to be somewhat careful in our approach to that because it's a bit different. We certainly, the best thing you can do as an independent person who's interested in these issues is if you see an opinion article that you disagree with, go ahead and submit a letter to the editor in response. Right now, editors are publishing a lot of these from people who write in. So typically what you do is if you see an article, an opinion article that you disagree with, just look up in Google the name of the outlet and the contact us or the name of the outlet, letters to the editor. And there's always some instructions for how to submit. Follow those very carefully. It's very important you do exactly what is said if you hope to have your letter published. That's a huge part of shifting the narrative where we've seen a lot of success. That gets us in print, that gets more voices being heard. It's very important. So we definitely encourage you to do that independently. And feel free, if you see an opinion article that you think needs a response, to send it to us, to send it to our email address. And we can see if there's any possibility for an alert, but we're getting a lot of emails every day with bad coverage that's problematic. So we're trying our best to sort of balance things out. I don't know if Tom or Fatima, you guys saw any questions that you think would should be answered, but those were two that I pulled out. I know we want to make sure we get to the other stuff.
I think those were great ones. Maybe just one last one. I see one here from Rada. She says, when a broadcaster is on an ongoing basis tries to manipulate public opinion, what approach do you take in this case? And obviously one example that comes to mind is the National Post. Jason or Fatima, do you want to comment on that? You comfortable? Or
yeah, Fatima, do you want to jump in, or do you want me to take it?
Take it. I'll see if I'll add something.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is, I think I talked during my presentation a bit about a strategic evaluation. If something rises to the level of a journalistic violation where we think that somebody like the National Post and their coverage of Israel and Palestine can be held accountable by the National News Media Council, who adjudicates these things and enforces these standards, if we think there can be some enforcement, yeah, then we will go ahead and do something. But it's very difficult because the National Post editors tend not to publish any letters that are critical of their opinion articles. They tend not to make any changes unless it's clearly a violation of standards and there's no ambiguity whatsoever. So we definitely pay attention and we watch very carefully. And whenever we see something, we go after them and we make sure we have a very strong case. But we're basing the decisions that we're making on these things on their own standards that they're bound to. So those are really important. That's what we have to work with. That's the structure that's built for this kind of work. So we take those standards very seriously and we employ them whenever possible.
exactly. And we have had success once in a while with the National Post. We did at one point critique, there was just a terrible op-ed last spring. And one of our staff, Michael, wrote a really powerful response to it. And they actually gave him like a lengthy letter. They said, you know what, you made some good points. We'll give you some space for a letter to respond on this. They didn't take down the opinion piece that we objected to, but they gave Michael an opportunity to respond, which was good to see. The National Post is actually a member of the National News Media Council. So as Jason stated, they can, in theory, be held accountable, but there's a lot of wiggle room with these things. So you really have, as Jason said, you really have to have a compelling case and so on. But it's certainly something it's not out of the realm of possibility, but you have to have a very compelling case. I think that's good. We'll have a bit more time for a Q&A at the end of our hour here. So if we haven't gotten to your question, we might have time later, depending on the other questions.
Great. So that brings us actually to the second part of the webinar, which is how to make a call to your MP. So back to you, Tom.
Okay, well, thanks, Fatima. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about a tool that we launched last week, something that we're really encouraging people to take advantage of. For years, we've been inviting people to send emails to their members of parliament, and we have a tool that I think a lot of people are familiar with and very comfortable with, and they zip right in and they send an email to their member of parliament, and it works very well. And those campaigns are very effective. Members of parliament are counting the emails and so on. But something we just launched last week is actually a tool where you actually are able to call your member of parliament, and the uptake on that wasn't as much as obviously that we see in the email, because the email you sort of click a few links and it's sent. Here you actually have to sort of set aside a few minutes and maybe find a place where you're alone and you can make a call without interruption. So we understand that it's a little bit more difficult, but we also suspect that part of the reason that people are a little bit uneasy about making a call to their MP is they're a little scared. I mean, honestly, I'm a little scared when I'm calling someone like an MP as well. So it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's but it's nothing. It's not a big deal either. Let me assure you, I've met with a lot of MPs, and they're not particularly impressive. They're no smarter than the average person. They're very average people. So just want to talk to you guys about how to use the tool, walk you guys through it, and we'll actually do it here online. So you guys will see me and you'll see my screen. So just a few things in terms of you reaching out to your MP, whether it's in person, as Alex will be talking about a little bit later, or over the phone. First of all, they're paid to be your representative. You've elected them, or the people that live around you elected them. So they're paid to be your representative. They truly do, most of them truly do want to know what you think. even if they disagree with you. It helps them to get a sense of a read on the riding, how their constituency is actually feeling. Even if you don't get through to your MP, it's not every day that you call the MP's office and the MP themselves picks up, although that has happened, but it's pretty unusual. But even if you don't get through, even if you just end up leaving a message, or even if you end up just speaking to their staffer and leave a message with their staffer, they do take that into account. So don't feel like, oh, I didn't get through to my MP, it was worthless. No, absolutely not. If you leave a message, that's already something, and they do count those things. They count emails, they count phone calls on the various issues. Your MP wants to get reelected, so he or she wants to know what people think. Also, you don't need to be an expert to speak with your MP or to speak with their office. You just want to be respectful and speak from your heart. So I've talked about how the possibility of when you call that your MP might not be available. I've talked about how you might get an assistant, how you might have to leave a message. Obviously, it doesn't have to be something long. And, in as much as I said earlier, you might want to go to a place where it's quiet. You probably don't need to set aside 20 minutes. You probably only need to set aside like 2 minutes or step out of, close the door to your room for 2 minutes and go ahead and make the call. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to show people the way it looks. So let me pull that up. Of course, my screens have all been mixed around. So let me see, and I'm not seeing the screen that I want to see. So let me see all of them. All right, give me a second. This was what happens when you start shifting around among screens, and give me a moment. And the windows that you want Zoom to show you, there we are, aren't showing up. Here we are. So that should show up now. Let's try that. There we are. Okay, so I have gone into the tool. The URL for the tool is cjpme.org/phone4ceasefire. And maybe if one of my colleagues can put that in the chat, https://www.cjpme.org/phone_4_ceasefire. If you go there, and of course we have this both in French and English, if you go there, you'll see a little introductory text, and then it's a little different than our email tool. The top looks a bit like our email tool, but then it shifts a little bit. First, we say tips for using your tool. And I just went through some of the things. You don't need to be an expert. You just need to be respectful and speak from the heart. And then we go through the different steps as how it's going to work. So you want to fill out these fields here. And I've filled out these fields for me. I actually live in the riding of our Foreign Affairs Minister, Mélanie Joly. She's the MP for Ahuntsic-Cartierville. So I've already filled out the fields to sort of save time here. It says, first of all, fill out the fields so that our tool has the information it needs to actually look up your member of parliament. So that's what also, in my case, I've already pre-filled these fields out, and my member of parliament is listed there. What it's going to do, when I click this button, make the call, and I've also put in my telephone number here. When I click the button, make this call, it's actually going to call my phone. And once it's got me on the line, then it's going to call my member of parliament. And so I'll start hearing ringing on my line. Once I pick up, I'll start hearing the ringing, and then they will answer. And so then I'll start talking. Now, the interesting thing about that once I click this make the call button, there'll be a second screen that comes up for me, which actually lays out some points. And I actually have this second screen here in front of, I put it opened up in a different tab. So when I click that make the call button, I'm going to get these points, talking points, put in front of my face. So I'll be able to sort of look through them. There'll be a reminder. So the first thing I need to do is introduce myself. The second thing I need to do is talk about the situation in Gaza. Third thing is I need to emphasize that Israel has to follow rules, and Israel can't just bomb civilians willy-nilly, and so on and so forth. So a few points that we suggest. Or obviously, if you have other points you'd like to make, you're welcome to do those. Now, as you can tell, it's very useful for me to have both a screen in front of me where I can see these points, plus my cell phone apart. So the ideal case is you'd be in front of a computer or laptop when you use this tool. That way you could have this stuff in front of your face, and the call will be made to your phone. You can pick up the phone while you're able to read these notes. If you do it, you could do it all on your cell phone, but you wouldn't have these notes in front of you. So that's sort of the approach. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, assuming, given that it's close to 7:30 here in Montreal, I will probably get her voicemail. You know what I'll do? If I don't get her voicemail, like if I actually do get someone alive, I'll go ahead and put myself on mute, and Fatima and Alex can continue with the final portion. But I probably will get a voicemail. So if you don't mind, bear with me. I'll go ahead and leave a voicemail, and you'll hear the types of things I say. And it might not be all that polished because I'm doing it here on a webinar, but I'll do my best. And once I've left a message, we'll wrap up here. So let me give this a try. We actually tried a few different things. I think it's going to work. I'm going to call with I have my cell phone ready. My cell phone has been listed. I'm going to go back to this screen. I'm going to click the make the call button. And in theory, and I've tested this many times, but you never know what happens when you're doing something live. In theory, my cell phone will first ring, and I will answer the cell phone, and I'll try to put it up next to the microphone on my headset, and then you'll hear the MP office answer. So let's give this a try. Here we go. So we're waiting. There it is. So I'm going to put that.
Hello, Thomas. Thank you for participating in the Phone Your MP to ask for a ceasefire campaign of Canadians for justice and peace in the Middle East. Your participation is essential. Connecting you now with Melanie Dowling, MP.
I'm probably going to get voicemail. And last time I did this, they have a voicemail both in English and in French.
La boîte vocale appartenant à Bérénice Joly, députée de Supercellule, est pleine et ne peut pas accepter de nouveaux messages en ce moment. Ou un peu plus tard. Au revoir.
Okay.
Call one complete. There are no additional parties to call.
Okay.
Thank you for participating.
Okay. So she's pretty popular. Her voicemail box is full. That's the message that I got in French. So it's okay. I did leave a message last week, but ideally they should be clearing their voicemail. But I suspect that is a pretty busy time for her. So what I can do, so I've completed the call, and actually, if you notice, it actually said completed there. Now, final thing that I can do is I can go down here and I could put in notes. And CJPME will see these notes. And sometimes if it's an important call or there's something significant that happens, or the MP would like someone to follow up, let's say the MP says, you know, I'd really like to talk to an expert. Is there someone you'd recommend? You can send that in a message to us, and we would see that. So I'm just going to write here in this thing, I'm going to say, call went to voicemail, and then voicemail was full. So that's it. It was full. And, you know, feasibly, I could call back tomorrow. Maybe they'll clear out their messages tomorrow morning, and I could try again. And I'm going to go ahead and click this button and say submit your feedback. And that takes me to the final landing page, where we offer a few other things that people can do, different things like the email campaign and different things, ways you can share this. So that's pretty much it. I guess I'll leave it at that, and I'll pass it back to Fatima so that Alex can do our final portion here.
Thank you, Tom. So, yeah, we're now at our third part of this webinar, which is how to meet your MP. And I'll give the floor to Alex.
Okay. Sorry, just having the technical issues of getting things on screen. All right, I'm ready to go. So my goal for this section is to give you a basic introduction to speaking to your MP. It's not going to be exhaustive, but it gives you a little bit of a formula to get going. So my experience in doing this is I've been working on advocacy campaigns for 20 years. I've lobbied at the municipal, provincial, and federal level. Before CJPME, the two campaigns I spent the most amount of time on were the campaign to stop the energy use pipeline and then increasing Canada's international development commitments. So when I first started out as a young activist, I thought my job was really to go into an MP's office and basically scream at them to do the right thing. You know, I had a very oppositional posture to communicating with MPs that kind of came out of my experience as being a student activist. I think this is a really crucial posture that's important part of movements, but it's not a posture that is effective in cultivating a relationship with an MP that opens dialogue. As I kind of matured, I shifted my posture and thought my job was to tell MPs all the facts that they didn't know, and that telling them all the facts would convince them to change their positions. After time, I learned that MPs are not really motivated by the facts. One of my very first meetings with a cabinet minister, I basically spent that 30-minute meeting telling them why their climate plan was inadequate based on science. And as you might be able to guess by what I'm saying, they didn't change their climate plan after that meeting. As I've gained more skill and experience at lobbying and advocacy, I've come to learn that the focus when engaging with an MP should be on cultivating a relationship, leveraging what power you have, and then trying to persuade them or influence them. So to start off with, if you don't know who your MP is, the basic place to go look is on this link, ourcommons.ca/members/English in my case, FR in the case if you're primarily Francophone. I always start off with a request to meet by email. I tend to keep my expressions about the issues light. I don't want to necessarily kind of like use my best material in the email and not use it in the meeting. And I always follow up a day or so later with a phone call, and then I phone every week until I get the meeting that I want. So I think a thing to really remember about MPs, as Tom was saying as well, is they're regular people who decide to become elected officials for a reason. And our job over time as someone who's an advocate is to try and understand their motivation, because then we can become more persuasive as we learn more and more about our MP. MPs, as I said with my story, don't need to know all the facts. You don't need to be an expert to talk to your MP. You just need to be willing to put in the time to be able to quickly and concisely communicate about the issue. What they really care about is understanding why you care, and if the feelings you're sharing reflects the sentiments more broadly in their voter base. Because at the end of the day, MPs are always motivated by re-election. It can be very common for MPs to come across as non-committal. And one of the reasons is whenever they're talking to you, they're comparing what you're saying to a number of different conversations. So they don't necessarily know what they're going to do until they hear from a lot of people. So that's why they can come across as non-committal. But one of our key goals is getting them to commit to an action. So the thing to remember always when calling up an MP's office, whether it's leaving a message or talking to the staffer, is that the MP's staff are their gatekeepers. Being kind and respectful to them is essential to gaining access to the MP, because on every single call, reading every single email, they're screening out the people that they think are too difficult for the MP to talk to. MPs are available in Ottawa at their constituency offices or by Zoom, and you can request where you want to meet them, whether it's online or in person. MPs always value personalized communication over templates, forms, or memes. And I think the last thing to always remember about not being an expert when speaking to MPs is it's perfectly acceptable to say, I don't know, let me follow up with more info. The worst thing you can do in an MP meeting is BS. So the keys to effective communication with an MP are pretty simple. You want to try and engage in a dialogue or have a conversation with your MP. You want to ensure that they feel heard just as much as you feel heard, but that you always feel empowered to steer the conversation back to the point that you're trying to make. I've sat in a lot of meetings with MPs and it can get pretty tangential. So there's an element of a dance that happens where you have to let them express themselves, but not too much, and you need to steer it back onto the point you're trying to make. And that comes with time and experience. As I said, some of my first meetings were pretty raw. So always ensure you convey your personal reasons for caring about an issue that you're bringing to their attention. It's absolutely acceptable and encouraged to share the emotions and feelings that you have about an issue. It helps them understand why you're motivated to act. At the same time, communicating respectfully with your MP and staff is key to keeping the door open. It's okay to criticize their policy and the positions of elected officials. Just try and steer clear of personalized criticisms. So criticize the policy, not the person. And that will keep the door open, because what you're going for is an ongoing relationship where you shift these people over time if they're not currently progressive. And then kind of lastly, ensure that when you do speak to an issue, it's as like direct and concise as possible. You should be able to summarize your issue in 5 minutes or less. And the talking points that we will be sending you into the future will be helping you with that goal. As I said, when I met that minister for the first time, I did not need to spend 15 minutes criticizing their climate plan. So the most important part of meeting with an MP is having a clear ask that you can verify that they did it. So they're really strong when they refer to the parliamentary roles and responsibilities they might have. An example is Heather McPherson from the NDP. She is the foreign affairs critic. So she's a really important person to talk to and to reference. Her role as foreign affairs critic if you were a constituent of hers. When you're thinking about your acts, you want to think about the one that's going to have the most impact. A simple tweet is going to have less impact than, say, a letter to the prime minister that is then tweeted. The asks should be precise and personalized. So an example one that I have here that I alluded to already is I would ask the MP, will you write a letter to the prime minister calling for a total ceasefire and post that letter on Twitter? It does two things. They're communicating to the ultimate decision maker, but they're posting it on Twitter so you can hold them accountable to actually doing it. So they can't just say yes and then not do it. So that is my section in a nutshell.
Thank you, Alex. Really great advice. So we've reached the end of the webinar. These were the 3 parts of the webinar. I don't know if we can take maybe a few more questions.
Yeah, well, we have a response here from a question here from my friend Pat. Hello, Pat. So glad you're able to join us here. Pat is asking, he says, I've sent a letter to my member of parliament about 2 weeks ago. He replied with a generic, condemn all terrorist attack message, but Israel supports Israel's right to defend itself. So Pat's been sending letters. How should I continue to proceed in the best interest of Gaza? Should I insist that we meet? What approach? So Alex, do you want to respond to that one? I think you're on mute.
I wasn't able to internalize it through you reading it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's Pat Kelly there if you want to look it up.
Pat Kelly.
7:36 p.m.
Yeah. So Pat, this isn't uncommon. I feel like, yes, you can ask for a meeting, and in your emails, I wouldn't get into much of a back and forth. I would just respectfully request to meet. And then I think we're very much noticing this kind of this argument as one of the key motivating factors for people taking a pro-war position in this case. And I think the thing that we're grappling with the best way to communicate this, but in a nutshell, what we're saying is that it's not going to be effective to try and liquidate Hamas because one, it's causing genocide and ethnic cleansing. Two, if we actually did liquidate Hamas, it'd likely end up like Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq, and we'd have a worse actor come into the vacuum that has been created. And then three, we're on the precipice of a regional war, and going full bore into liquidating Hamas will create a regional war that is likely to draw Canada in further. So that's kind of the response that we're working with right now in response to kind of that pro-war position of kill all the terrorists.
Alrighty. How about another one here for you? I'm looking at the one from Brandy, 7:39 p.m. Alex. She's saying, I already spoke to my MP and get the feeling that he won't take another call or respond to another email from me. I wish I'd had this webinar before I spoke to him because the way I felt after that interaction was indescribable. But worst of all, I felt ineffective, and I know he manipulated the conversation to not allow me to make my points. I will still try again. You know, if you feel like you've had a sort of an interaction that sort of resulted in a dead end, Alex, any thoughts on that? Reviving things?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is time. I think the situation will evolve and there'll be new points that you can bring up with your MP. Ultimately, they do represent you and they're required to continue a conversation with you. So as much frustration as you're feeling on the inside, it's just like take a breath, leave the keyboard for a week and go back, request a meeting. And you know what? Like, I'm available to go with people to meet their MPs. Sometimes MPs won't meet with me because I don't have a constituent. So we can have a mutually beneficial relationship where if you get a meeting with your MP, CJPME can be there to have your back.
Maybe Fatima, we have lots of questions, so maybe we can take another 5 or 10 minutes of questions, but I want you maybe release the people that had only had an hour to be with us, and if people need to leave, and you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, so it's already 8 for people who maybe want to log off. You can. I just want to remind everyone that if you want to try out writing a letter, we're going to be sending an alert maybe 30 minutes after the webinar. And you actually have to sign up to be a media responder before to receive the alert. I saw a lot of questions about this, so I'm going to answer it now. This webinar was recorded and will be available on Facebook and YouTube when possible. And I guess I just want to thank everyone who has been there since the beginning of the webinar for their interest in CJPME and helping making changes regarding Palestine and Palestinians. Just stay in touch. You'll get a follow-up email. And I just want to wish the people who are going to be leaving a great evening. And we're just going to be maybe wrapping it up in like 10 minutes for just to answer the questions that we haven't been able to answer.
And I did put some links. I think all the pertinent links that we've have come up in our discussion here tonight, I put them in the chat. Michael, it looks to me like they're only going to our panelists. I don't know if there's a way for you to pull them out and send them to everyone. I guess someone else already did those as well, but I just want to make sure that our broader audience is seeing all those. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Okay. We've got a question here in French. Fatima, do you see the one from Yves at 7:41 p.m.? So he's talking about he's sent several messages and left So he sent several emails and left several telephone messages to Justin Trudeau and Melanie Joly, and he never receives a response. He's wondering why. Are they overwhelmed? He says his messages are supportive of Palestinians, but he's still very polite. Any advice? Fatima, do you want to give this a try, or should we pass it to Alex? Do you want to respond in French quickly?
I mean, you translated pretty well, but I guess Alex would be the best person to respond to this question.
Sorry, I was answering questions in the Q&A. So which question is it?
Well, it's Yves Parizeau. They're in at 7:41.
7:41.
Yeah, Oh, go ahead.
Well, he's saying that he's sent messages that have been very, very polite, and I just wanted to some degree this is a similar question to the others. He's been very polite. He's pro-Palestinian, but he's polite. Is it worth continuing to send messages and so on?
Absolutely, the government needs to hear pro-Palestinian messages on a regular basis. The pro-Israel lobby is very organized, and they don't settle for one message. So keep up the good work. Sometimes you'll get meetings or more communication out of it, and sometimes it's just being counted and registered. And the more personal your communications, the better, because they actually have algorithms in terms of weighting public opinion, and like handwritten letters account for the highest on the public algorithm. There was another question about whether or not you can take part in confrontational activist actions, but also have a positive relationship with your MP. And the answer is yes, and it's all about the tone at which you participate in more activist actions. I think no MP is going to want to have a relationship with you if you yell in their face all the time. But if you peacefully sit in their office over this issue, there's nothing about that is like mutually exclusive from having a respectful relationship and dialogue with them. Most MPs recognize that, like nonviolent direct action is a part of democratic politics. And I think you can just remind the MP of that, given how many people are dying, that you want to step up for that, but you're not precluded from having a conversation with them.
One point I'll make that I probably should have made while I was going through the Phone Your MP tool. Sometimes the telephone numbers of the MPs actually don't work. So sometimes you'll run the tool, you'll do everything perfectly, and it won't connect you. And so that there could be a number of reasons for that. If that happens to you, let us know. Let us know your postal code, and let us know what actually happened when you tried to call the office. Did it just not connect or something like that? So do send that to the info account, info@cjpme.org, and we'll see what we can do. See if there's a problem with actually our platform. But our platform provider, this is their bread and butter. They keep things up to date. So it is sometimes possible that a member's office their telephone will be inoperative. It has happened many, many times to me. But do let us know. That'll be helpful. Alex, Jason, you guys see some other questions? Fatima, any other questions you guys think we should respond to? While you guys are looking, one other thing, somebody asked the question, if they're a permanent resident and not yet a citizen, is it okay to call? Absolutely. They're not like sort of they're not screening. You might be a permanent resident today, and 3 months from now you're going to be a citizen. They're going to listen to you, but you never get asked. I've never been in a meeting and had someone say, well, are you a citizen? If you're not a citizen, I'm not interested in talking to you. So don't worry. They need to hear from you, and you may very well be a citizen in just a matter of weeks or months. Yeah, Jason, Alex, questions you're seeing? Fatima, anything?
Well, there's a lot unfortunately, we'll be able to answer to all of them. But we really appreciate all the questions.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot. There's one I could just, it's a very brief answer. Somebody saying they sent a letter to the editor, they never heard back. There were a lot of questions about just not hearing back. My advice is be persistent, follow up. These editors are getting a lot of messages. double check that you followed their guidelines. If they have guidelines about how to submit a letter to the editor, most publications say if you want to submit a letter to the editor that might be published, follow these guidelines. If you're just trying to get in touch, just follow up, try a different email. And if all else fails, we're very overwhelmed, but you can always try to reach out to our media accountability project and ask for help. We try our best to get back to people, but it is very busy. But yeah, persistence is key with the media for sure. I mean, we've sent with CJPME staff like well over 1,000 letters out at this point. So you got to keep trying. And for a lot of the media outlets, it took many times before we started hearing back.
And at some level, Jason and Fatima are the key, are the two most central key players of our media accountability project. Just want to highlight that. So thanks to you two guys for doing such good work these past few months, and especially these past few weeks. But I mean, one thing that we've observed is, to some degree with the letters, it's almost like a numbers game. That we realized that when we started writing more letters to the editor, we got published more. You know, if you're out there more, if you're giving your opinion, they're interested. And especially if you live in an area that is not a major urban area, if you live in a sort of a smaller city, they're quite interested in hearing from people. It really helps the engagement, and so you have actually a decent chance of getting published if you have a well-written letter and some interesting points to make. So definitely just keep at it. Don't give up, and eventually, you know, your day will come, honestly.
There was one question that I found in the chat that I did want to answer, because it's helpful. And there are some people who might be watching this whose MP has already called for a ceasefire. That is one thing we didn't address. In which case, I think the thing to remember is that MPs can change their positions. There could be a lot of pressure on them from the pro-Israel lobby because of that. So hearing gratitude for the position that they took is really important. It's really crucial to, once an MP takes a position that you like, to give them positive feedback, because they're going to hear a lot of negative feedback. So at that point, the positive feedback is really important. And then the next steps for them are having conversations with them and pushing them towards taking positions on the overall occupation of Palestinian territories that push for a just and lasting peace. And obviously CJPME on our website has lots of resources there on the issues of the longstanding struggle to get a just and lasting peace.
I see there's a question here from my friend Jamal. And he's sort of saying that he's worked his whole life, worked to promote Palestinian human rights and against Israeli violence and so on. And given everything that's happened these past few weeks, he's actually feeling a little discouraged. I won't read what he's written. You folks can see it in the Q&A. And he says he's heartbroken about what's happened, and is all his effort for naught? And I would say no, absolutely not. I think sometimes we think of ourselves as being sort of in a struggle, and this is the biggest struggle ever, and but there have been bigger struggles, honestly, in history. The struggle to abolish slavery took literally centuries. The struggle to abolish Jim Crow in the United States took decades and decades. The struggle to abolish apartheid in apartheid South Africa took decades. So we are in one of these tragic historical situations, and we just have to keep at it. The other side has the influence that it has, not because they've done anything illegal, but just they've kept at it. We just need to start doing what they're doing. We just need to keep at it and exercise the access that we do have to the media, to our elected members. We need to get involved. I mean, it's very encouraging for us here to see all the involvement, a lot of people getting involved these past few weeks that traditionally haven't been involved. And things at some point are going to quiet down with this current sort of spasm of violence. And I encourage people not to discontinue their involvement. Organizations like CJPME, we depend on people continuing to maintain an interest in these things and continuing to care, continuing to support us, continuing to be involved in our programs. So, you know, we just have to do consistently what the other side has been doing consistently, and things will change eventually. It won't change maybe as quickly as we would like, but we just have to keep at it. And there are changes that we see, many good changes. There are obviously some changes don't always go the direction that we want. I think the polarization, the post-truth era is not working in our favor, different things like that, but we just have to keep at it. Sorry, a little pep talk, but I saw Jamal message me and I just felt I had to respond. Should we wrap up with another one and call it a day, guys? Anyone else see a question they'd like to respond to?
I tried my best to type as many answers to media questions, but feel free to email if there's still something really pressing that was missed.
Okay, there's a question here. Maybe Alex, you can help out. Nichelle is asking if you can share the link to find your member of parliament, our Commons link. If you could put that in the chat, that would be great. Well, I think we're my clock says 8:14, so I think we've taken a lot of questions. Maybe we should go ahead and wrap up. Fatima, you want to take us home?
Yeah. So again, so I'm just gonna repeat what I already said for the 200 people that are still there. Thank you, honestly. Reminding that an alert will be launched 15 minutes after the webinar. Again, you have to be signed up as a media responder if you want to be able to try it out. Again, this webinar was recorded and will be available on Facebook and YouTube when possible. Thank you, everyone that is still there, for your presence, for your interest in CJPME, and just wanting to make changes regarding Palestine and Palestinians. Unfortunately, sorry, we couldn't get through all the questions, but we really do appreciate your interest in your questions. Stay in touch. You'll get a follow-up email soon. And yeah, have a great evening. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Good night.